welcome. Very excited to have this conversation today. I've got two wonderful guests with me. We've got John Glantz, who's the VP of CX Transformation and Outsourcing at InflowCX. I'm also joined by Kyle Underseth, who's an enterprise sales leader at Assembled, and according to him, you don't have to fact check this, but former NBA player. Just don't look it up, but trust him, right? No, we're really excited today to talk about outsourcing and just best strategies, what we're seeing in the space. There's a lot of good questions and good conversations from two experts in the space here. Before we dive in, I just want to give a quick high level on InflowCX, who we are and what we do, in case you're not familiar with us or if it's your first time joining us. We're an organization that helps companies understand their technology, people, and processes in the contact center and customer experience space. So we've got a really strong focus all around, helping organizations understand where they're at today, where they want to ultimately get to, what they're trying to accomplish. This is a great way to say that. And then aligning them, again, through technology, through processes, or even through people, like outsourcing, like we're going to talk about today, to ultimately reach those goals and help them out. We're completely vendor or technology or partner neutral, and we act sort of as a guide or a Sherpa of sorts, I guess, to help our end customers navigate this very crowded and complex and sometimes convoluted space. As I mentioned, we do have a great partner network. One of those are Assembled, and that's where Kyle's from. And Kyle, before we jump into the meat, could you take a minute or two just to tell the folks on the call about Assembled and where you guys are and where you fit in the market?
Sure. Assembled is the support operations platform. So there's two things that we do kind of under the support ops umbrella. One is workforce and vendor management software, and then the other is AI and automation. And the two often, at least in our world, complement one another. If you're interested in getting more data on BPOs, which we'll talk a little bit about later today, asynchronous forecasting and headcount planning, or automations, Assembled is a very interesting option in the workforce space.
Excellent. Awesome, Kyle. Well, thank you. And hey, since you're already warmed up and you got the vocal cords warm, I don't know if John is yet. We'll give him some time, but maybe we'll just go ahead and start with you. What are you seeing in the outsourcing space today? I know there's a lot of different ways that the space has evolved, especially in the last probably 1 to 3 to 5 years. But yeah, what kind of trends are you seeing right now?
Yeah, we generally see across companies really of all sizes, from 50 agents to like 20,000 plus agents. We're generally seeing that if you're going to outsource, maybe it's the first time you're looking to support a new channel, you're looking to add a new product line, more hours of operation, language support. Maybe you're looking to find a second vendor. That's another thing that we're seeing. It's either kind of first time or you're looking to diversify what vendors that you work with. All of this is underpinned by finding efficiencies. And efficiencies often can mean a few things. It's not always just cost, but it's kind of this perfect balance of cost and performance. How do you find the best options there? So that's one big thing that we're seeing. It kind of means like everyone is looking at BPOs, no matter what type of product that they sell or what type of company that they are. The other thing I think that we're seeing is a lot of teams don't necessarily know what they don't know when they go into outsourcing. It could be either the first time that they're working with the BPO, or maybe it's they do this all the time, but they're trying to find new BPOs. And I think it can be very difficult when things are changing so quickly. Like, how do I find the best vendor? What's the criteria to pick the best vendor? So I think those are things that we're seeing, different modalities, different expansion opportunities, and then always trying to find the answer to how do I balance my in-house team versus my BPO team.
Excellent. Awesome. And yeah, John, would be curious in your thoughts. I know you've been in this space for what you always say, longer than you'd like to admit. Yeah. What are you, what are
Makes
you
me a
seeing
glutton
now?
for punishment, Austin. So to kind of build on what Kyle said, we see clients that really fall into three buckets at the end of the day. One is, Kyle mentioned new to outsourcing. We're seeing a lot of clients right now that have never really outsourced their contact centers. I believe that every company, regardless of the size, outsources something. right? So they may outsource payroll, they may outsource legal, they may outsource something, but like to look at their contact center outsourcing, we're seeing clients that this is the first time they've ever done it. We're seeing clients that are doing it a lot and they're trying to understand what's out in the marketplace. And then we're also seeing clients that like tried it before, they didn't work and they want to investigate it again. And I'd say at a macro level, there's two reasons why they're looking that we see. One is this idea, I think Kyle put it very eloquently about efficiency. But at a tactical level, what clients are talking about is, look, I need to figure out a way to reduce my cost of service delivery at the end of the day. I can't, there's uncertainty about the economy. There's all sorts of issues that are out there, and people are like, well, I need to figure out a way to reduce costs, and cost is a big driver. And that gets real complex when you start looking at what that really means. And then they're also saying they usually have what I would call kind of, they're trying to address key business issues. So how do I scale? Like maybe I've got a peak season that I have to scale for. How do I have more schedule? How do I have more flexibility with my staff? If I have a captive staff, I pay for them over 20, 80 hours a year. So how do I create more flexibility in my environment? Maybe where they're under servicing in some cases. There's all sorts of those specific, what I would describe as kind of operational or just pure performance issues that they're really trying to solve for, and they're looking at outsourcing as a potential solution. So those, at a really high level, that's really what we're seeing. Those almost every engagement that we're involved in right now, it falls into one of those buckets.
Okay, interesting. And I think, John, one of the things that you mentioned is there's a lot of people out there now that are, again, trying outsourcing for the first time, or tried it, didn't work. Let's try it again, right? How do you think, or what do you think, I guess, are the most key things when you're trying to maintain a successful partnership with an outsourcing provider? I know there's a lot that goes into it, right? It's physically not your employee. It's not like you can walk over and give them an attaboy or an attagirl a pat on the back, right? In terms of just on the daily. But I know there are a lot of key things that some of our best in class customers do to make sure that relationship is fortified and really strong. What are some of those things that you're seeing?
Well, I think it starts, especially with the folks that are doing this for the first time. It's funny, almost every time we have a conversation with someone that's new to outsourcing, about outsourcing, inevitably from someone we will hear, well, I don't see how anybody else can possibly do what we're doing right now. It is like, and if you're introducing like, hey, we want to do this in a nearshore service delivery environment, so Latin America, Caribbean, or you're introducing the idea of offshore service delivery, it's almost mind-blowing to them that somebody actually besides our own employees can do this and do it effectively. And so that's literally where we start from, is there. So the key to being successful is really understanding, what do you do today and why are you doing it? So really honing in on what is the strategy or motivation to actually go through the change initiative that you're going through. Because let's not kid ourselves. We tend to, as people that do stuff like this for a living, sometimes we minimize the complexity of the change management initiative. Part of how we make clients feel better about what hey, don't worry about this. We do this all the time. We're going to make this really, and all that's true, but it's still an initiative, and it gets bumpy at times. And so it's really knowing exactly why we're doing this, what we're getting out of it, and like where we start with clients, especially ones that are saying, we need to reduce costs, are really understanding what their core costs are in their current, operation, which you would think is easy. But, clients tend to look at, well, this is what I pay my people per hour, right? I pay them $18 an hour or $20 an hour. And they want to compare that to an outsourcing rate as a of service delivery in their current environment. And that's what they're comparing to. And then when you bring in these new suppliers with their costs, that's the point of comparison. So it's really kind of doing all that fact finding on the front end, helping them develop a strategy, helping them document their requirements, and then matching potential suppliers to those requirements and saying, these are the people we think you should talk to, and this is how they align to your requirements, and then taking them through that selection process. I'm amazed at the number of clients that especially the ones that say we tried it, it didn't work. Well, how did you find your outsourcer? Well, I Googled contact center outsourcing, and these were the first two that popped. And those are the ones that we talked to. And, I don't want to say they all fail, because we work with a lot of those people that pop up in the first two or three, but a lot of them fail because of that, because they don't really understand what they're doing, why they're doing it. And then lastly, and most importantly, how do you, who in your operation is going to own that relationship? I reject the notion that you're just throwing it over the wall and it's somehow going to work. You have to manage it like it's your operation. And when my clients talk about them, those, like they talk about their outsourcing operation like it's something separate. That's something that the person I work with will work with them on. No, this is you. This is your operation. At the end of the day, these are your people. And it's a really key thing, that mindset of, I own this, it's mine. I just pay for it differently at the end of the day, is really key to, there's a whole host of other things, but that mindset from the very beginning, what, why, and how, and then who's going to own it, is really key to success. And I would say you increase your likelihood of a successful long-term partnership when you start going to it with that. So
Yeah, that's a good vantage point, I think. And for any literature fans out there, maybe it's, hey, talk about it in first person, not in third person, right? But why do you think that's so critical, John, for to get in that mindset of, hey, this is me, not, oh, this is them?
Because it's hard, Austin. It's hard. Let's not kid ourselves. It's hard. Look at contact center service delivery, no matter how you do it, is hard anyway. I used to work for somebody 100 years ago that would say, hey, look, this is just people talking to people. And that's true, right? It's very true.
Yeah.
But let's be honest. We have an idea of what people are calling us about. We don't know for sure. And we've trained agents to handle those interactions. We've deployed technology, but it's not like the scripting and the mapping is perfect. These are human beings talking to another human being at the end of the day. So there's a little bit of it that's up in the air, right? That we don't know. And that's the magic of all this. And so if you don't think of it that way, and you don't go into it saying, look, we're going to do this. We're working with a client right now. And that was one of the things we work with. Who internally is going to own this? And when they you need to have multiple levels of ownership. When they got that and tied incentives to that, that's when things really took off. That was the power. That was really what powered that us moving forward, was that people really had a really, this is mine and I own it, and I'm going to make it work at the end of the day. So
excellent. Awesome. No, good responses, I think. Kyle, what about on your side? Like from your lens, how do you maintain a successful partnership with your outsourcing provider if you're an end customer?
Yeah, and I think we have we have the same view, John, as you, that your vendor should feel like an extension of your team. And I think the way that we can help drive that, and that we've seen in the field, is, if you're going to move from a world of vendorship to partnership, you have to have the data. And I think a lot of times, if you're working with a BPO, you're dealing with spreadsheets, you're dealing with kind of, they said, we saw, you're not aligned. And so I think from our perspective, if you want to get aligned with your vendors, you have to have the numbers. And, as a former NBA player, you have to, the difference between the best performing teams and an average performing team is truly being able to measure every aspect of performance. And I think that's where, what can be measured can be improved. And I think that's an extension as well of how to think about working with your partners. You need to be on the same page talking about metrics.
Look, I made the transition. So early in my career, from being a service provider to owning, to moving from being a service provider to a client, right? And so flip that dynamic. And when I was in that service provider world, I used to think, God, wouldn't it be great to be a client? What do they do all day? They sit down, they have coffee, they don't really actually do anything. The people on the service provider side do all the work. And then when I went and did that job, and you're 100% right, Kyle. It is the hardest thing in the world to be sitting back waiting for information and trying to figure out what's going on, right? Especially, when things are going great, what's going on is really important and often forgotten about. But but when things are not going great, that's when it becomes critical, right? And I think people, we forget that. And it is absolutely a key to success. So
And that's why you have to pick the right vendor, because it's
right.
not, you're not measured about when things are going really well, but it's when things are going wrong, when you have to collaborate with your vendors. And I think naturally it's, quite scary to give up control of part of your operation. And I think the other thing that we're seeing, maybe going back to your first question, Austin, is you don't need to go with the biggest, lowest cost partner. I think a lot of times, and actually what we're seeing is that there's many more partners out there now than I think there ever have been. You've got, specialized partners. You've got partners that can do every time zone, every language, with so much diversity in who you can work with. I think it's about picking the right vendor who's going to align with you on what metrics matter most. And I think if you take it slow to move quickly, you're going to have much better results in the long run.
Amen. Amen. And I think there's sometimes an overemphasis on, like, if the supplier's charging you per hour or per minute or whatever, some increment of time, there's an overemphasis on, well, I need to get the lowest hourly rate I can get. And that somehow that translates into a lower overall cost. And I always tell everybody it does. I don't want to say it doesn't matter, because of course it matters. But at the end of the day, what matters is you're paying that supplier to do a job. There's you're paying them to handle the transaction. They're deploying people and technology to handle that transaction. And it's really what it costs to deliver that at an acceptable, a great level is really what you should focus on. And so if somebody charges $1 more, then they have to deliver $1 more in value at the end of the day. And it's really understanding that math that's key to really being able to sleep at night when you work in the outsource world. I really understand that. So
yeah, definitely. There's definitely a difference in price and cost, right? Price is what you're paying, and if what you're paying is the lowest, you might have a lot higher cost than someone who's $1 or $2 more, just depending on, again, going back to what you're talking about, Kyle, the data that you have. You're only as good as the story you can tell. If you can't tell a very good story other than, oh yeah, but we got the cheapest hourly rate, that's not going to go very far if everything else is, not going so well. I think that, go ahead.
What I was also going to add, like, a lot of times the conversations that we're having is not just with our partners, but it's also internally. And so now we have to go justify, hey, we missed SLA, all the time last week. Our partner was the one taking, the majority of volume for a channel or a queue. So I think having that conversation internally as well with leadership is a really important step to making sure that if we need to get more budget, let's go get it, because it's not worth us, cutting corners here.
Well, and having the data to support those discussions is key, right? I talk to clients about this all the time about, hey, if you're looking at how are you going to govern, this whole idea of governance across the channel, when you're sitting in front of your boss or a board or whatever, and you're saying, well, this is what I think is going on, and this is what I think we need to do. I mean, I've been in that position. It's lousy. It's really, really bad. And so being able to have data saying, to be able to support your story of, hey, this is what we need to do, and this is what we're going to get when we do it, to be able to create a business case for investment, or to be able to tell a story about, hey, here's where we're at today, but when we do these things, this is where we're going to be, or this is how I know that we're doing an excellent job here. Because there's a lot of noise. Anybody that does this knows there's a lot of noise that goes on as well through this channel, because going back to my earlier comment, it's people talking to people, right, at the end of the day. So
yeah, that's really important. I think one other thing that is really important to understand is when it comes to outsourcing, I understand, John, it's really not best practice always to have all your eggs in one basket from a supplier standpoint, right?
right.
We talk about it a lot. I think a lot of companies, whether it's your first time outsourcing or whether you've just, the old adage, always done it this way, can fall into that trap sometimes. And some people, supplier, you think, okay, this is my supplier, this is what they do, and they'll do that forever as long as things are working well. We don't have to replace them, right? But we're seeing more and more this sort of multi-supplier strategy pop up in the market. And Kyle, really interested in getting, you and an Assembled's take on what a good multi-supplier strategy looks like.
I think this does come back to the data, and maybe to crystallize a little bit of what data matters here. First, I think most teams will work with one vendor because outsourcing is a lot of work when you get started to do it with one vendor. Now, all of a sudden, you're multiplying the amount of work if you're working with multiple vendors. But there is technology that can help us. One way that we see the data coming into view is first, how do we easily allocate requirements to a bunch of different vendors? If we have a different language and a different channel and a different time zone, we need to make it really easy to take the requirements that likely our internal team is creating, and how do we then share those in a easy, normalized way with all of our vendors? The other thing often that we see with multiple partners is this concept of a commitment, where each vendor, maybe 3 months in advance, will say, hey, I can commit 10,000 hours for the following 3 months. The vendor might need to go, or the partner might need to go higher in order to hit those commitments. But getting visibility in a normalized way around what the requirements are for each partner, what the commitments are, and then the key piece that we help unlock for teams is, what do the schedules actually look like? Now, one of the reasons getting the data so hard is because you have tons of scheduling data living in tons of different tools. If I work with 3 different BPOs, well, now each BPO has their own scheduling tool. And it's really hard for me to collate all the data to make decisions. And that's another thing that we can help surface for teams, is giving them a single pane of glass for requirements, commitments, and then the schedules that support those commitments. And so for us, that's what a multi-supplier strategy looks like, is getting the data, normalizing it. And often you probably want to do something like champion challenger when you've got a bunch of vendors that you're trying to figure out, hey, we're going to expand hours of operation in a different part of the world. What vendor do we work with? You have to have the data to know how to make that decision.
Excellent. Yeah. And John, on your side, I mean, what are you seeing in terms of best practices for this sort of multi-supplier strategy?
Well, I think, depends on the client in many cases. So, if you're talking about a client with some kind of, either a certain number of agents, a certain footprint, for sure. I mean, it wouldn't make a whole, if I had 30 seats of contact center that I was outsourcing, to put that in, maybe there's a use case, a reason to do it, but it probably might, the juice might not be worth the squeeze at the end of the day.
Sure.
But for a larger client, we're kicking off an engagement with a large client, over 1,000 seats worldwide. This is going to be they may end up aligning with one supplier, but it's going to be multi-location, so and there's a lot of reasons to do that, right? Just geographic diversity. When I worked prior to working with Inflow, I worked for Optum, and I participated in a disaster recovery exercise where we were talked about different disaster recovery scenarios. And one of the scenarios we worked through was, well, what should we consider global pandemic? Now, this was 2016. Should we consider global pandemic as a solution that we should do a plan for? And at the time, we thought, well, I mean, how likely is that? What could happen that would shut the whole globe down? I mean, we had our centers spread out across the world. And, of course, a few years later, we saw what could happen. I mean, I tell people that story now, and they look at me like I'm an idiot, and I feel like an idiot telling it. But, that wasn't even considered a reasonable likelihood. Well, today you have to think about that kind of stuff, because these are business critical functions that have to be done. People need stuff, and you have to be able to service it. I tell clients all the time, the number one rule in a contact center is, when the phone rings or a chat comes in, somebody has to answer it. And technology can be a part of that solution, but somebody has to answer it at the end of the day. And and then we also see clients that need specific expertise. Language is one where you see multi-supplier strategies being deployed. Or if I'm looking for a specific capability, there's a lot of different service providers that do a great job on these kind of boutique niche applications where they do an excellent job and they can deliver it at scale, but they do this one thing really well, and that's it. And that's what they built their business around. So there's all kinds of reasons to do it. These have to be complementary, though. In many cases, sometimes you can only go so far. Like champion challenger is an interesting one. But you can't. You're not, because of the issues, the scaling issues that Kyle talked about. I'm not sure it's a great idea to be bouncing volume back and forth between suppliers on a monthly basis. I'm not sure that you get out of it what you think you're going to get out of it. But if you have a champion challenger strategy with a long-term view, that to me is a great way to drive overall high-performing results out of your overall business over a long period of time. So,
yeah, that's interesting. We do have one question from the audience that I want to get to before we tie off here. So, a couple more minutes here. But I always say, it wouldn't be a CCAS webinar or fireside chat or discussion if we didn't at least talk about AI once. And someone's affording us that opportunity. So we've got a question from the audience, and this guest is asking, how do they know whether it would be better to automate like via AI? John, you mentioned technology can solve some problems, right? I think it's a fair question, versus just outsourcing, a particular subset of interactions, let's say. Yeah, can you guys both maybe comment on that? Maybe Kyle, if you want to kick it off.
Sure. I mean, I think the first thing is that AI is not going to take everybody's job, like we've been told, even in the contact center. I think there's a lot of innovation, certainly, that we're going to find, but there will always be room for agents because customers will always have problems that are really hard to solve. What we see is there's two ways that you can use AI. You can either use AI and put it in front of your customers, deflection, containment, whatever you want to call it. Oftentimes there's a risk of a bad customer experience there, but we'll have no idea. The other way that you can think about AI is putting it in front of your agents. And I think this is often a really interesting approach, especially for BPOs. Like, what if your BPOs, what if you could cut down their onboarding time by 50% by finding the right materials that the agents need in real time based on the content of the ticket? There's going to be a huge discussion in the support world about where AI is going to be most effective. I'm not convinced it's going to take all jobs. I think there will be, 15 to 25% of tickets that AI is best suited to solve, but what happens to everything else? Those are now the hard tickets that agents need a lot of help with. And so how do we think about supercharging the agent and improve quality as opposed to take the work, off our plates altogether, which could lead to a bad customer experience?
Sure. Yeah. John, what about your thoughts maybe in the last minute or so?
I don't see them as competitive solutions. I see them as complementary solutions. I tell clients all the time, why can't you do both? The truth of the matter is the change management effort is different on both of them. And so we see clients all the time that are saying, look, long term, I want to deploy AI to resolve transactions using technology to do that. Awesome. I think that's a great thing to do. And Kyle brought up a couple of great ways to do that. That takes time. That change management journey takes time to tune that out and deliver results. Outsourcing delivers more quickly at the end of the day. And we see clients all the time are saying, look, I'm using the savings generated out of outsourcing to fund those long-term technology initiatives. And over time, I've got agents handling these interactions, but over time, those interactions are going to go away. And we see a lot of outsourcers that are deploying that technology in their own environments as a way to monetize this as a long-term strategy, as a long-term strategy to continue to work with clients. I mean, it's here to stay. It isn't. I agree. And honestly, if we can deliver simple interactions using technology that meet client needs, why wouldn't we? Right? At the end of the day, why wouldn't we? It's no different than what we first talked about. We move stuff from service delivery here in the United States over to why should we pay twice as much for an interaction that can be serviced successfully at half the cost? Why wouldn't we do that? I mean, if it's your business, everybody would do that at the end of the day. So anyway, that's the way I see it. I think it's a great discussion and always look forward to having it with clients. So
excellent. Well, hey, thank you both. This has been really, really insightful, especially at a high macro level. if you're attending and thought this conversation was interesting or helpful or got some good nuggets and want to have a one-on-one conversation about business when it comes to outsourcing or AI or anything we've talked about, please feel free to reach out to InflowCX. You can reply to the email invite you got for this webinar. You can go to our website. You can call us. You can chat us. However you see fit. We'd love to talk with you about how we can help out. And thanks. Have a great rest of your week.
Thank you, everybody. Kyle, thanks a bunch. So
Yeah, good to see you both.
yeah. All right. Take care. You bet. Bye.